The trouble in our quiet little retirement community started with Karen. Not just any Karen, but a super Karen, armed with a blonde bob, a clipboard she wielded like a scepter, and a voice that could shatter glass from 50 feet away. She declared herself president of a homeowners association, HOA, that didn't exist. No official documents, no city approval, just her printer and a wild belief she was destined to rule. At first it was almost comical. Notes taped to doors about trash cans being an inch off center or passive-aggressive digs about the wrong shade of paint on garden sheds. My 78-year-old grandfather, a Korean war vet who'd faced artillery barrages, just chuckled. Karen's Comic Sans font wasn't about to rattle him, but then she crossed a line. Without a shred of permission, she and her boyfriend Ken, a fake security guard with zero authority, tapped into Grandpa's private well, a 30-foot deep lifeline he dug decades ago, to water her ridiculous Zen Zone rose maze. She siphoned off about 50 gallons a day, enough to leave Grandpa's tomatoes wilting and our water pressure tank gasping. When I confronted her, she flashed a smug smile and said, "We're all in this together. Water sharing is neighborly." Neighborly? Stealing from a veteran to feed her hedge labyrinth wasn't neighborly. It was a power grab dressed up as community spirit. Karen didn't stop there. She printed fake violation notices, like one claiming Grandpa's flag in the flower bed was excessively patriotic and might spark international tensions. It was absurd, but it wasn't funny anymore. Her fake HOA wasn't just a nuisance. It was a calculated abuse of power, preying on a neighborhood of trusting retirees who just wanted peace. And that's when I knew we had to fight back. What started as a petty annoyance in our retirement community spiraled into something far uglier when Ken, Karen's boyfriend and self-styled security guard, took center stage. Karen's fake HOA had already worn us thin with her ridiculous rules. Notes about non-compliant trash cans and complaints that Grandpa's sprinkler, quieter than a whisper, disrupted community auditory harmony. Grandpa, a 78-year-old Korean war vet with a garden so pristine the bees practically sent him thank you notes, brushed it off at first. He'd survived worse than Karen's clipboard tyranny. But Ken was different. He strutted around in camo cargo shorts and a security vest no one had hired him to wear. His aviators so dark you'd think he saw into another dimension. The first time I met him, I was trimming hedges, hardly a crime, and he demanded to know if I had a permit for my clippers, muttering about HOA regs that didn't exist. I laughed for 5 minutes. Grandpa didn't. He just stared out the window and said, "Guys like him don't stay funny forever." He was right. The harassment escalated fast. Notices piled up. Grandpa's flag was excessively patriotic. His hose a weaponized water distribution system. It wasn't just absurd, it was personal. That garden was the last thing he and Grandma built together before she passed. A 20 by 30-foot patch of memories he tended with quiet pride. Watching him hesitate to turn on the hose, afraid of another citation, made my blood boil. Then came the breaking point. One afternoon, Grandpa was watering his lilies, barely a gallon's worth, when Ken stormed over, fists clenched, screaming, "Get on the ground!" He pulled a pistol from under his vest, aiming it at a man who'd faced down war with nothing but a hose in his hand now. Mom screamed, I ducked behind the mailbox, and for a few heart-pounding seconds, fear gripped us. Ken, with his stolen gun and fake authority, had turned Karen's petty power trip into a full-blown threat. It wasn't about sprinklers or roses anymore. It was harassment so bold it shook our peaceful cul-de-sac to its core. That's when I texted my FBI uncle, and the real fight began. Karen's fake HOA had pushed us too far, stealing water from Grandpa's private well, a 30-foot deep treasure he dug himself, to feed her so-called Zen Zone rose maze. She took about 50 gallons a day, leaving Grandpa's tomatoes drooping and our water bills climbing. When I confronted her, she smirked. Water sharing is neighborly. Neighborly? Stealing from a 78-year-old veteran wasn't neighborly. It was a slap in the face. I couldn't let it slide. Grandpa's garden, a 20 by 30-foot sanctuary he'd built with Grandma before she passed, was his pride, and watching him hesitate to turn on his hose because of Karen's nonsense lit a fire in me. So I got creative. I'd noticed her shoddy irrigation setup, a mess of PVC pipes and a badly installed backflow preventer tapping our well. Inspiration struck. I rigged her system to pull from a secondary tank I'd set up in our shed, one I filled with gray water, old dishwater, laundry rinse, and a generous splash from the septic pump. I dubbed it Community Compost Tea, a nasty brew of about 100 gallons, left to marinate under the summer sun. She never suspected a thing. Her roses started browning, her maize turned soggy, and 2 hours after I flushed the whole system, Karen was in her backyard shrieking at Ken to fix it. She blamed airborne toxins from a neighbor's barbecue. I just smiled from our porch, sipping iced tea. It wasn't just revenge, it was poetic justice, turning her theft into a stinking, swampy mess that mirrored her schemes. I'd documented everything, videos, photos, timestamps, stored in a folder I called HOA Hellscape. But this was my favorite move. It didn't stop her right away. Ken stormed over with his fist clenched, then his gun, escalating things further. But that first strike, it felt good. Ruining her precious Zen zone with 100 gallons of sewage-laced payback wasn't just petty, it was a declaration. Mess with us, and you'll drown in your own greed. The roses rotted, the raccoons gagged, and I knew this was only the beginning of bringing her fake empire down. The moment Ken pulled a pistol on Grandpa, everything changed. He'd been watering his lilies, barely a gallon's worth, when Ken, Karen's fake security guard boyfriend, stormed across our 50-foot lawn screaming, "Get on the ground!" Grandpa, a 78-year-old Korean War vet, stood frozen, hose dripping, facing down a barrel over nothing but his garden. Mom burst out screaming. I ducked behind the mailbox, heart pounding, and hit record on my phone. Karen's fake HOA had gone from annoying to outright dangerous, and I wasn't about to let it slide. I grabbed my phone and fired off a 3-word text to my uncle in the FBI Counterterrorism Division. Gun, Grandpa, now. He'd been tracking this saga since I vented about Karen and Ken over Thanksgiving turkey, and his reply came fast. ETA 5 minutes. Ken didn't see it coming. He strutted like he owned the cul-de-sac, gun trembling in his hand, thinking he'd scared us into submission. But then tires screeched. 2 black SUVs roared up, doors flew open, and out stepped Uncle Mike and his team, fully geared, guns drawn, shouting, "Drop it!" Karen shrieked. Ken froze, and Grandpa's hose slipped, splashing Ken's shin one last time. A perfect touch of swamp water justice. The FBI didn't stop there. While Ken sulked in the back of an SUV like a kid denied dessert, an agent pulled out a thick folder and turned to Karen with icy calm. "Ma'am, we need to talk about your financial activities with this HOA." She blinked, voice climbing to panic mode. What financial activities? Turns out she'd scammed 15 elderly neighbors out of thousands. $300 every 3 months from folks like Mr. Donnelly, who cried when he learned it was fake. Not because of the money, but because he feared he'd broken rules. The feds had records, fake dues, forged city stamps, an account in Karen's maiden name. This wasn't just about water theft anymore. It was fraud, elder harassment, and Ken's stolen gun from a pawn shop 2 states over. Family brought the muscle, law enforcement brought the hammer, and together they smashed Karen's pretend empire right there on her rotting rose maze. Once the dust settled, Ken cuffed in an FBI SUV and Karen facing fraud charges over her fake HOA, the neighborhood didn't just breathe a sigh of relief, it roared back to life. For months, Karen had bullied us with her clipboard and bogus rules, stealing 50 gallons a day from Grandpa's 30-foot well for her Zen zone maze, while Ken waved his stolen pistol like a suburban dictator. But when the feds hauled them off, something shifted. Neighbors who'd quietly paid $300 every 3 months to avoid trouble, like Mr. Donnelly, who thought he'd broken some law, started talking. Sweet Mrs. Patel, forced to repaint her house because Karen deemed her yellow too intense, hung an American flag on her porch. Within days, a dozen homes followed suit. Flags, garden signs, even Halloween skeletons popped up across our 10-acre community. One guy painted his mailbox neon green, rigging it with a speaker blaring circus music every time it opened. Another planted a pink flamingo on Craig's lawn with a sign, "Free Bird, HOA Survivor." Craig, a wannabe tyrant in a polo shirt, tried to resurrect Karen's scam with his neighborhood compliance council, sending letters demanding Grandpa remove his flag garden stone from our 20 by 30-foot yard. Big mistake. I caught him sneaking around at 2 a.m., measuring our fence with a flashlight, and the feds shut him down too. Harassment, fraud, the works. But it wasn't just law enforcement that crushed him, it was us. The neighborhood turned his visual uniformity nonsense into a rebellion of color and chaos. Grandpa built a planter box, carved "Liberty Grows Here" into it, and set it center stage with a solar spotlight. Kids left painted rocks, smiley faces, freedom in shaky letters, and someone added a plastic eagle with sunglasses. My video, Karen's Cult, hit 200,000 views by noon, exposing their fake signs and threats to 500,000 people. The city even praised us, using our story to train officials on busting predatory HOAs. We didn't just survive Karen and Craig, we triumphed, proving a community of retirees, armed with hoses and heart, could bury a cursed crown and grow something stronger in its place. At the core of this wild saga, where a fake HOA stole 50 gallons a day from Grandpa's 30-foot well and Ken pulled a gun over a garden hose, was a man who never raised his voice but refused to bend. Grandpa, 78 and a Korean War vet, had seen real battles, so Karen's clipboard rants about his excessively patriotic flag or disruptive sprinkler, quieter than a breeze across our 20 by 30-foot yard, didn't faze him. That garden was his legacy, built with Grandma before she passed. Every lily a memory he watered with care. When Karen tapped our well for her Zen Zone maze and Ken screamed, "Get on the ground!" with a pistol aimed at him, Grandpa stood firm, hose dripping, dignity unbroken. I fought back, flushing her roses with 100 gallons of septic-laced compost tea, calling in Uncle Mike's FBI crew. But Grandpa, he just kept tending his plants. After Ken's arrest and Karen's fraud charges, when Craig tried to revive the tyranny with his neighborhood compliance council, demanding Grandpa remove his flagstone, he didn't flinch. He called Uncle Mike, sipped his tea, and let me handle the cameras. The neighborhood rallied, flags flew, flamingos landed on lawns. But Grandpa's quiet resolve was the heartbeat of it all. He carved "Liberty Grows Here" into a planter box, lit it with a solar spotlight, and it became our symbol. My video hit 1 million views exposing the scam to the world. But the real legacy came when a young man drove 200 miles with an envelope. Inside was a note from his dad, a former resident too scared to fight the HOA years ago. The video, Grandpa saying, "I just wanted to water my lilies," gave him his voice back. "Dignity doesn't have an expiration date," the note read. Grandpa nodded, offered the kid pie, and said, "That's worth more than any medal." Every Sunday now, folks gather on our porch for Liberty Hour. No rules, just lemonade and stories. And when that hose hisses over the lilies, it's not just water. It's Grandpa's legacy, proving dignity can outlast any bully, leaving a mark deeper than any crown. This story carries powerful lessons for us as we navigate our later years. First, it reminds us that dignity is a strength that never fades. Grandpa, at 78, faced a gun with nothing but a garden hose, showing that standing tall in the face of bullies doesn't require loud words, just quiet resolve. For seniors, this means holding firm to what matters, whether it's a garden, a home, or our peace of mind, no matter who tries to take it. Second, community is our backbone. When neighbors rallied with flags and flamingos, they turned individual fights into collective triumph. We can apply this by leaning on friends or family, sharing burdens, and lifting each other up. Third, creativity can outsmart chaos. Flushing a thief's roses with septic water wasn't just revenge, it was a clever reclaiming of justice. In life, we might not always have power, but we've got wisdom to find smart solutions. Finally, our legacy endures. Grandpa's simple wish to water his lilies inspired a stranger 200 miles away. Every small act of courage we take today can ripple outward, proving that age doesn't dim our impact, it deepens it.